Rick, our next speaker comes from all the way from Australia, was kind enough to get up very early this morning or tomorrow to join us. That's Grant King of Hot Chili. So let's welcome Grant King onto the stage. And please, Rick, while he's coming on, tell us a little bit about Hot Chili.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Hot Chili is one of the most important new copper discoveries in the world from my point of view. I am a shareholder now. I've been a shareholder for a substantial period of time. I would like to draw the attendees' attention to the fact that the discussions that we're having today are really an adjunct to discussions that we had at the Boca Raton conference. So as you listen to the remarks today, remember that you're going to have to put them in context to the general session speech and the workshop speech, as well as the CEO interview that I did with Christian Easterday. What we're doing today is really filling in some of the blanks, I think, from Christian's talk to allow you to get some sort of contrast and content. Grant, first of all, thank you so much for starting your day so early and joining us from literally the other side of the world. It's a delight to have you with us.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, we're not enjoying the Northern Hemisphere summer at the moment. We're in winter, and I'd like to say I'm joining you from nice sunny Perth, but it's a little dark outside at this time of the morning. But thank you very much for inviting me to the conference. I'm really honored to be here.
A lot of our listeners enjoyed Christian's presentation, so I think they understand that this deposit has size. It has a wonderful location on the Pan American Highway with access to ports, access to power, access to desalinated salt water. What I would like to emphasize in our discussion now is the potentially transformative events which have occurred very recently with your exploration in terms of developing out what all of us hope becomes a high-grade core or high-grade cores. So perhaps give us a little overview of the cluster of deposits first, and then talk about the importance of the new drill holes in terms of understanding the deposits and in terms of getting quick payback.
Sure, yeah, that's, you need that quick payback to get a project off the ground and up and running and making economic sense. And as you've said, the scale is certainly there. It's whether those initial years can be made fruitful enough. And I think, in the drilling and the announcements that we've put out recently, we've started to bring forward our satellite plays. And this is not a new strategy that we've been working on. It's something that's been ongoing for a long time, but we've had to build each as we go. And I think that last announcement from Valentina, hitting the highest grade assays we've had at the project to date, that's really not a surprise to the people who've been working on those satellite projects. They are very nice grades. They're if you like, the other side of the strategy. One side was to make it large. The other side was to bring in grade at that front end and to look into the region and say, where are these small historic mines? Where would we have really good chance of success at finding, high grade tons? And so Valentina's really been being sort of unveiled to the market with some of those spectacular assay results. And San Antonio was previously the sort of unveiled when we did the resource upgrade recently, and sort of showed that there was several million tons there at good grade. That very open pittable, something that we can bring into production and blend into the front end of the larger consolidation play. And it's really great to be getting some good intercepts at those grades. And I would say there's still more to come from those deposits.
Let's quantify that. The average mine grade worldwide in the copper business right now is just below 0.5%. Yep. So tell us something about when we describe these as high grades. Give us some of the hits and talk about them in the context of there being multiples of the average mine grade worldwide.
Yeah, sure. So Valentina hitting the 8 meters at 5.7% copper. I mean, so right there, you're talking something that's 11 times the average mined grade. It is, and it's not something that's going to cost us, an arm and a leg to mine. It's an open pittable type target. So we're not looking to put an underground and very low tonnage. We're going to be able to go in there and strip this thing out in a fairly short time frame. Once we've built a resource around it and supported those, but even San Antonio's grades go quite well compared to the average mine grade. And again, that is 4.2 million tons. It's looking like it's something that we would mine over the course of 2 or 3 years. Putting in 1 million tons or so each year into the mill, and really just adding something which has double the grade of our other deposits. And even though it is not necessarily connected with the same infrastructure that we're using to connect Cortadera and Productora, the grade allows it to make it to the mill with it can afford to be trucked with a different solution than a large scale conveyor, and still affect the front end return. So 5.7% coppers, we're quite happy with that result, and I think if you saw the earlier announcement on Valentina, you'd be aware that there were other interesting hits, and we could only report them visually. But it'd be interesting to see how those results stack up against what we've just announced as well.
Grant, it's Albert Liu here. Wondering if I could ask you a few questions from the audience.
Sure.
First question is just how do you deal with the political risks in this jurisdiction?
Well, I think political risks exist everywhere. It's they're different flavors, but they are ever present. I think you sort of run the gamut of being in countries without a long and storied mining history, where your risks are in those cases are a lack of understanding of the mining, a lack of regulatory framework, and dare I say it, issues with governments taking back their resources once you've invested in them. We're not in that situation. We're in the other end of the spectrum, where we're in a country with a fantastic history of mining and a very good understanding, an economy that appreciates mining. However, with that comes the inevitable, I guess, lure for the government of perhaps drawing more income from such a cash cow as mining, and so that's something that happened in Australia, where I'm from. And if I look back in my days as a consultant, I was handed a white paper on Australia's mineral resource rent tax, and asked to determine what it would mean for a project, for an iron ore project being started up, and that tax never eventuated. But I guess what I'm saying is I'm no stranger to governments coming up with ideas of how they might tax their mining industry in new and inventive ways, and at the moment, Chile is going through that same process. There's nothing that has eventuated out of it at this stage. They put forward a proposal, and it was found to lack the backing, so it's not going to be proposed in full. They'll go back to the drawing board, I think, and see what other levers they might come up with, and get something that perhaps has a little more cross-party support so that they can get it through. That's something that's always ongoing, and I think Chile, in terms of political risk, is actually very low. I think the approvals process in these sort of advanced mining economies is the other end of that spectrum of political risk as well, in these advanced economies, where you have very long approvals processes, sometimes involving multiple court challenges. I think the system in Chile, I'd put it similar to the Australian experience. There's a well understood framework, there's a well understood process. Yes, it can take some time, but there's plenty of experience in navigating the process, and we have recruited excellent advice and consultants to help us work through that process.
Hey, Grant, another viewer is asking about other risks. So general market crash, but particularly the drought situation. Care to comment on that at all?
Yeah, look, I guess I guess I'd be seeking a clarification around which drought, in that our project is located in the southern edge of the Atacama Desert, one of the lowest rainfall areas in the world, and which makes it excellent for solar power generation. However, not necessarily the best location to be growing fruit trees, for example. So when you look at the photos of our project, you'll see that the flora in the region is dominated by plants which really don't like to be eaten, and consequently have spines on them that are the length of your hand, and it's a cactus-ridden area. When you mentioned drought, we actually had significant rainfall about 2 or 3 weeks ago that went on for about a week, and we've just finished our repairing all of our access tracks and roads, etc., to continue operations. So if there is a drought, I guess no one told our site, and in general there is always a drought in the Atacama. However, the nearby town, which we're planning to draw much of our workforce from, and already draw much of our existing field team from, is located in the Wasco Valley, which is a really nice agricultural valley that grows olives and grapes predominantly. But that's actually fed from glacial feed, so that's not something which relies on the rainfall at all, which is why it's sort of really nice to have an agricultural area in the middle of a desert.
Isn't it also true that a lot of your processed water likely comes from desalinated water? I mean, you're basically, 30K from the Pacific?
Yeah, that's a good point, Rick, and it's something which really sort of goes to our, I guess our part of our work on ESG, which is underway and ongoing, and it's something that we'll really sort of unveil in the fullness of the PFS. But which doesn't mean to say we haven't already begun those programs several years ago. One of them is to use not desalinated water, but actual seawater. I mean, obviously we could use desalinated water, but it's about the cost of that water. And our decision several years ago, before the PFS, was to pursue a seawater option, so that we didn't have to include a desalination plant, and thereby increase the amount of entrained energy in our product. So we're going for a much lower energy, much lower environmental cost by just using direct seawater extraction, and we've undertaken all of our metallurgical test work using seawater. The trade-off was pretty clear once we realised that we were getting a recovery bump from using salt water. So it wasn't much of a trade-off when it's cheaper and produces more revenue. That was pretty easy. The only larger expense we had was lining the pipeline to reduce corrosion.
Looks like the last question here from a viewer has to do with regulations. So it says Rio 2 recently had an EIA rejected, even though they worked collaboratively with authorities, seem to have done all the right things. How does this affect how you proceed?
Yeah, I think that's really a case of having a fantastic relationship with the government. We have a very good relationship with the government. We've done deals to support the local economy, and obviously we've been applying for something like, for example, our maritime concession, the seawater extraction point. That permit was a process that took 7 years. It's not something that you develop overnight. In terms of and saying that, I understand Rio 2's position. I guess it's always a risk going into an application, and that's where it's really important to have advisors who work with the government in many cases and understand how the government will react to your submission before you actually submit it, and you can adjust it accordingly to improve, to give it the best chance of approval success. So I'd say it's not without risk, but we're very confident that we have taken all of the environmental considerations into our process, and that what we will eventually submit next year is something that will not only pass, but also pass in a reasonable time frame. We have allowed, what our advisors would recommend for that time frame, but it's and it's not insignificant. It's sort of around in the order of 18 months, but that's the sort of it's a process where you can easily get derailed if you haven't considered everything. And I'm not not privy to what the exact issues were with Rio 2's submission, but this is not our first environmental submission. And as you know, we would drilling is not done without very similar processes. And in fact, in Chile, there are different levels of sophistication to even just your environmental permits for drilling. And they range from very small programs, and being a company that has built a regional consolidation play, as you've no doubt seen in other presentations, we have been through several drilling programs, not just Cortadera, but Productora, satellite deposits at San Antonio, Valentina, other regional exploration plays. These things have all required environmental approvals before we can put drill holes into them. Some of those drilling environmental approvals themselves take 12 months. So we work very closely with the government, and while it's always worrying to see other companies like Rio facing what Rio 2 went through, we see it as a risk that we spend a lot of time focusing on and minimizing, and I don't think when we finally submit our EIA next year that we will have any issues getting it through.
All right, Rick, final question for Grant.
The final question goes back to my questions. I understand the concerns about the environment and tax. I'm just getting to the point where trying to get us to the point where we have something to tax. With regards to the high grade, I have two questions. One, in both high grade deposits, what are the tonnage implications? What do you see now? What can you grow it to? And also, how high up in the system or how deep are these high grades? In other words, do these high grades actually constitute a starter deposit, or are they going to add value later in the life of the deposit?
Yeah, great question. The announcement probably previous to Valentina, Rick, was also some pretty specky, plus 1% intercepts, and they were really being sourced from Productora. And I think, given that the drilling around Productora, in its heyday finished 2015, 2016, the market really hasn't seen an intercept from Productora for several years. So it was great to get. We needed to do some technical drilling, and that was really the focus for the first half of the year, was to complete the technical drilling. We picked up some holes in Productora and Alice, and we're able to announce those to the market. That's the first sort of high grade intercepts from that deposit that anyone's seen for 5, 6, 7 years. So it was good to remind everyone what Productora is, and you'll know from Christian's presentation, he has a couple of cross sections going through our 2 starter pits at Productora, and you can really see in those cross sections the sort of the nice chunky high grade lodes that we're building those pits to capture. So Productora, in terms of when we look at the larger Costa Fuego, Productora is still the first cab off the rank. I think there are still improvements to be made in that deposit with a little more drilling. I note that the Alice interceptions came back, much higher than anticipated. That's the small satellite, small porphyry sitting off to the west of the Productora Central pit. So yes, I think in terms of building the tonnage, we've already demonstrated with the PFS in 2016 that Productora had the legs to sort of support itself and get itself up and going. The way we have looked at that in the mine planning at this stage is Productora is still the initial start for the project, and really post Productora, it's an expansion to bring Cortadera into the mix. In terms of we have what we have at Productora for our high grade, and we know that very well. We've worked out, if you can't add high grade into it, you can certainly change how you're dealing with it. And one of the programs that we're looking at is how to, lift our average metallurgical grade by doing something which is fairly standard, and that's stockpiling the sort of lower grade material and treating it later on in life. Everyone understands that. It's a well-trodden path. It's typically known as cut-off grade optimization. What we've been looking at is a way of bringing that low-grade material, not just rather than leaving it till the end of the mine life, actually to begin processing it in a separate processing stream, which does not tie up our utilization of our concentrator. So it is still running full steam ahead, processing our high-grade material, while the lower-grade material is actually getting processed through other methods, methods which then tap into the synergy that we have with the oxide side of the project. Productora generates circa 30 plus million tons of oxide ore, grading similar to the fresh, and that material is being processed in a typical heap leach SXCW to produce copper cathode. And that's about 10% of our studied production that we're working on. The low-grade material then offers us an opportunity to use the back end of that circuit, not the heap leach itself, but something a little more a little more suited to the low-grade material we're considering, which is a dump leach, which then feeds the pregnant leach solution into the back end of that SXCW plant. So that as our oxide resource is exhausted in the early years, we continue to use the back end to generate cathode copper, but it's from this material that previously we would have been leaving for another 20 years. So we're able to, bring that revenue forward and therefore get even more aggressive with our cutoff grade optimization and increase the average grade through the mill. So that's that's both sides of our high grade strategy. Rick, we're looking for high grade satellites, but we're also looking for levers to pull to increase the average grade of our concentrator.
Thank you, Grant.
Okay, we're getting pressed again against the clock here. But Grant, I'll mention that there are more questions coming in that I don't have time to share with you now. I'm hoping that you would stick around after we leave the stage and maybe converse with some of these people who are interested in your company.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'd be happy to.
Okay. So thank you very much, Grant King, Hot Chili. And Rick, this brings us finally to the end. It's been a very long day and kind of a unique and fun experience for me, both on the stage and behind the scenes, dealing with this new technology. But overall, very fun, very beneficial, I think, to the people who came.
On the stage has probably been much more fun than behind the scenes.
For sure.
No, I'm impressed with the interactive nature of this platform. Yes, we have some technological challenges. Yes, we, meaning you, will overcome them. The feedback that we've gotten so far, at least from the attendees who have talked to us, has been all love, which is all good.
Yes.
I hope that any exhibitors or any attendees that have suggestions as to how we can make this better, let us know.
Right.
We've always gotten great suggestions from the attendees, but I love the fact that we're able to engage with people in depth, in detail, live, and then we're able to access a much, much, much larger audience in many different parts of the world virtually.
Yeah.
To continue the message. That's been really, really, really nice. Thank you for your efforts.
No, very good. And so you can email us at info@worldsymposium.com with your suggestions and comments. We invite everything, criticism and praise alike. And this is only a small part of the offering here, actually. These were intended to be basically bonus content. What most of you probably came for was the full archive of the Boca Raton conference, which is available to you now, and it will be available to you until December 31st of this year. How to get to it? You would have received an email from us shortly after registering, and the subject of the email was something like how to sign in. It would have been labeled from me. Subject, how to sign in. And in that email, there is a link to the archive. And underneath there is an auto-generated password that you use to get in. So you use the email address that you received the email at. and this auto-generated password. But if you have difficulties with that, info@rulesymposium.com. We'll be all over it trying to help you out. So I think this does it for our stage presentation for today, Rick. We're going to leave the platform open a little longer so people can, continue their discussions and get all their questions answered. But this is it. So I guess we'll sign at this point. Any final thoughts, Rick?
Simply that you get out of this what you put into it. Listen to the presentations. Listen to the big picture presentations for sort of paradigm. Listen to the analysts for strategies, but remember to pay particular attention to the exhibitors, which is where you make money now. We've taught you in pretty good fashion how to interrogate exhibitors. Listen to my CEO interviews in the context of how you can ask questions to further your own knowledge, and then go to the exhibitor websites. In every circumstance, we've provided you with human contacts inside the company that can answer specific questions that you might have as a consequence of your own reviewing the corporate presentations on their website, of your own reviewing the income statements and the balance sheets, of your own reviewing the press releases. We've given you all the tools that you may need to make money on a group of companies that were personally curated by the conference sponsors. So what you make of it now is up to you. Remember, the workshops are work. Listen to the questions that your fellow attendees asked. Take all these into account in making investment decisions. This was a wonderful assemblage of knowledge and a wonderful assemblage of opportunity. It's up to you what you do with it.
And actually, one final thing I forgot to mention is we have put almost all of the content on the archive now for you. However, there are some extra content that we didn't have time to get up there in time. Some additional interviews by Rick with the CEOs of some of these sponsoring companies. Those will be up next week by Friday. So I think until then, you have more than enough to tide you over, but expect even more to get dropped next Friday. And with that, we'll conclude here. Maybe we'll see you in the virtual lounge here, and then I don't know how long we're going to leave the platform open, but certainly long enough to get your questions answered from Grant. And we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.